When you're giving a persuasive speech, you usually have to tell people where you're finding your information because you're trying to change their minds or their beliefs or values or attitudes. So what this quick tutorial is about is how to cite those websites and other resources that you're using in your speech. Those resources being primarily books, magazines, it might be interviews or conversations you've had with somebody like an expert in the field, and finally some websites that you might have looked up. Here's an Easter egg for you. An Easter egg is a little bit of extra credit. If you can tell me what other lecture used this last image, the HTTP image, I will give you a little bit of extra credit. Send me an email through Canvas. So I'm going to give this a quick discussion in 5 minutes or less usually. All right, so if we start with both books and magazines, a couple of things you need to know. The first is you need to give us the title of the book or the magazine. If it's a magazine, you need to go one step further because we need to know what article it is from that magazine. Obviously, in a book, you don't need to do that unless you have some kind of anthology. We need to know the author who wrote it, and finally, we need to know the date of publication so we know how recent that information is. Moving on to the next popular way to include resources into a speech is through an interview, and that could be in person, it could be a Zoom conference or a Zoom meeting with somebody, it could be a phone call, it could be an email. All of those would be considered interviews for the sake of our discussion today. So a couple things you need to do, you need to tell us the name of the person. You also need to tell us what the title is of that person so we know their level of expertise. So are you talking to a manager or someone higher up? Are you talking to an intern? Are you talking to a volunteer? We need to know that information. We also need to know the date of your interview. We just need to know the date that it falls on, February 4th, 2021. That's all we really need. And finally, we need to know the channel. And by channel, I mean, was this an in-person conversation? Was this a meeting over Zoom? Was this a phone call? Was this email? Because it will influence the content that you actually have. By the way, this is also what you would do for a bibliography. If you've got a website, there's two different ways to look at this. We're looking at websites both as articles that have hard copy equivalents, but also as web pages like organizations and charities. So if you're looking at websites like NYT would be NewYorkTimes.com, SFGate would be San Francisco Chronicle, WP would be Washington Post, Fox News obviously is a program. You're going to follow one set of guidelines, which is give us the title of the publication like NYT.com, NewYorkTimes.com, the title of the actual article, the author if you can find one, and usually you can, and then finally the date. The other way to look at this is you might have a web page of a charity or an organization like ASPCA.org or CDC.gov, Centers for Disease Control, ACA.org, which is American Cancer Society, and so on and so forth. So most charities and organizations have websites, so it might be that you're citing those. So in this instance, you would give the name of the website, you would give the author if it's mentioned. Many times it's not mentioned, it's just the organization is considered expert testimony. And then you might want to give the date that that site was updated. There may again not be a date for that actual article, but we need to know how recent the information is. So you might want to add in the date that it's updated. Note that these requirements are going to be a little more strict than what maybe some other instructors will tell you or you might see online. I just like knowing a little bit more. And then, okay, last question then, how do I actually say all this stuff? Well, you can say according to, and then fill in website here, according to the CDC.gov or WHO, World Health Organization.int. You can also say that website and then says tells us. So for example, you could say sfgate.com tells us on November 3rd, 2021. So you can certainly do that as well. Either is going to be fine. There are other ways to do it, and you might want to mix it up a little bit. You want to make sure that when you get to the end, you mention the .com, .org, .mil, .edu, .gov, .int, because that lets us know exactly where you went. You will see some other designations like .uk, which is of course England. You've got .fr, which is France. You've got .cn, which is China, and then you come up with something like DE. What do you think that is? If you answer Denmark, you're wrong. If you answer Delaware, you're wrong. Not a country. The answer is Deutschland. So Deutschland, Germany. Germany is .de. If you see a designation CA, what do you think it is? No, it's not California. We're not a country either, although we like to think we are. It's actually Canada. And if you want to cite California, it would be .ca.us.gov or simply .ca.gov. That would also be a designation. So there you go. That's how you put the websites into your speech. Easy peasy, less difficult and time consuming than perhaps doing it in a bibliography. And you always want to make sure you mention the actual websites in your speech. You got this. Go work on your speeches now, and I will see you in the next class.